Hey Cam, how's
Hey,
it
Kirah.
going?
Good. How's it going? Thanks for having me
Good.
here.
Thanks for being here. It's cool that we're finally not just on the same coast, but on the same city or in the same city.
Yes.
Um, and after so long, after I don't know, I've been talking about doing this since we met over a year ago at Norwalk. But and then you weren't here. You were in Denver at that point.
Yeah, right.
So now we're both here, and hopefully at some point soon we can actually get together. But for now, this will do. I'm happy to have you here.
Yeah, and thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about everything today. And yeah, maybe one day we can actually hang out again.
So why don't you tell us more about yourself and your practice? You can share if you feel inclined to share your SMR, your Sun Moon Rising. That'd be awesome. And yeah, tell us more about you.
Okay, well, my name is Cam White, from born and raised here in California. I'm a Sagittarius rising, Leo sun, Libra moon. Uh, I've been studying astrology for, boy, I think 6 years now. And I've been doing it professionally doing it professionally, like taking readings and doing all that stuff since the when was that? End of 2016. So 3 years now. Um, yeah, I've mostly got into it through, the pagan Wiccan like route. Got really into like the elements and everything like that. Found a birth chart, got into the modern astrology, started really, understanding that a lot better. And then met Chris Brennan. He introduced me to Hellenistic astrology. So then I started studying a lot of traditional stuff. And I really like using astrology. Well, I mean, for kind of everything. It's pretty great for basically everything you can use it for. But I really I like the personal development part of it. Like, it's just very empowering, I guess, in a lot of different ways. And yeah, astrology is cool shit.
I love that you use the word empowering, because that's like definitely what I think of when I think of you and like your brand of astrology, and you being such a solar figure. Which, by the way, everyone, this episode is focused on the sun. I guess I didn't mention that yet. And the reason that I invited Cam to, you know, speak with me about this is because he's a Leo sun, and not only is he a Leo sun, he has a Leo sun in the ninth house, which is the house of the sun's joy. That's basically the house, the sun's favorite house to be in the whole birth chart. So Cam's such a solar figure, and I figured, like, who better to talk about the sun than be Cam White.
And what an honor it is to be looked at like that. Thank you. um, yeah, I feel like I'm pretty solar sometimes. At least that's just what I get called a lot. So I guess I'm a solar person.
You are. You're such a solar person, such a Leo, but in the best ways. Um, so yeah, I mean, let's also talk about how we know each other, because we were trying to like
We were
deduce
trying to figure
that
that out.
before
um,
beforehand. Yeah.
all I remember, I don't remember if we DM'd each other or how we engaged. It was something off Twitter, but all I know is when I showed up at Norwalk, I was like, I know for sure me and Kirah are gonna get along, and we're gonna smoke a bunch of weed, and it's gonna be super dope.
And that's
Um,
what we
and
did.
and that's exactly what happened. I just don't even remember how we got to that level of friendship,
I
or
just feel
or
like I feel like we were like knew each other on Twitter. We kind of like hovered around the same like follower count for a while before you like took off.
Mhm. We still
Um
have like the same follower count.
we still, yeah, we're still kind of, we've always kind of been in that same little, like, I don't know what I'm saying, but basically we recognize each other on Twitter. And yeah, I don't know, I guess I just always knew that it was one of those things. I was just like, yeah, that's someone that I'm going to get along with and be friends with, and I didn't really think much of it. But I remember we saw each other at Norwalk, and it was just like easy and simple. And I think that's because we have nodal synastry.
Nodal synastry. We're both sun in the ninth house.
Yes.
We're both ruled by a Jupiter in either detriment or fall.
Yeah. 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 And our nodal synastry is cool. It's like, then you have your north node, it's conjunct my Venus.
Yes, and
Really?
your moon is conjunct my south node, right?
Yes, yeah. Something like what degree is your south node? It's like 10.
No, yeah, it is 10. It's my south node. It's 10, and my Saturn
Okay.
is 7.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, my moon's at 14, but my Venus is at 10. So my Venus is like exactly conjunct your north node.
Yeah, and my Chiron.
Yeah. I hope I don't like make you feel pain and woundedness.
No, my chart does that automatically. I don't need anyone else's chart to feel that.
You do have a pretty gnarly chart, not gonna lie. Yeah, we've spent many hours during this quarantine, like ruminating over each other's charts.
Yeah, a lot. Back when quarantine first started and everyone was like, Venus and Gemini, let's talk to everyone all the time.
Yeah, Cam and I, along with some other friends, Drew Levanti, Scarlett, Coot, is it Coot? Yeah, Coots. That's how you would pronounce it, I think. Or is
Coots.
it
And
Coat?
I believe it is the S. No, it's. I just had this conversation with her too. I feel bad for not remembering.
I mean, I remember talking to her about, well, they're both going to be on here talking to me about Mars. So those two, Zach Powell, Kat Grubb, who we love, Micah, Knief. Yeah, all of us, like, there was like a week straight, one week where
It was
we
literally like
talked it was like six, like maybe 8 days straight, where we talked every single day, sometimes for like 6 hours.
you guys would go. I'm over here on the West Coast, so it'd be like midnight when I'd be done, and you guys would
Yeah.
like go to like 3 or 4 in the morning.
Yeah, it was wild, but it was so much fun, and we just like, yeah, hung out on house party and like played games and shit. It was
The
it
house
was a good
party
time.
days.
Yeah, I don't have the energy for it. I don't know how we
I,
did it, because I could not imagine doing it nowadays. It was Venus in Gemini. That's
It
what
was
it
Venus
was.
and Gemini before the North Node came in.
Yeah. True, true. So yeah, let's talk about the sun. I mean, purposely recording this on Sunday. It's Sunday, August 9th, a little after 7 p.m. Pacific. Yeah, 7:30-ish p.m. Pacific. And yeah, it's the day of the sun. I definitely did a little bit of solar ritual earlier, put on some like solar materia and like stood in the sun for a little bit. Can't do that for too long because it's hot as hell. But yeah, I again like wanted to bring Cam on to talk about the sun because he is so solar, and I just want to kind of start to tap into what it means to be solar, like what the sun represents in astrology and in our birth charts. And then we're going to look into what like a strong solar placement might be, and like a more difficult solar placements and how to work with that. So yeah, I mean, we're both ninth house sun, so we were both born with the sun in the ninth house, basically like shortly after, maybe not shortly after, but a couple hours or so after noon. And the sun in the ninth house, it's the house of the sun's joy, and referred to as the house of God. Kim, do you want to speak to like what that means for the sun to be in its joy in the ninth?
um. Yes, I guess what. Well, it kind of there's a kind of a lot to it to speak to it.
Yeah.
What do I want to speak to exactly? I think. Well, well, let me ask you this. Do you want to know like why the sun finds its joy in its ninth, or I think why the sun well, hold on. I'm just trying to think about that a little bit.
Yeah, take your
Well, because
time.
with the sun in the ninth house, what I think is so comfortable about it is that it's I mean, not kind of going into the essential like dignity thing or the joy scheme, and just like the looking just at the what the ninth house represents and what the sun represents. There seems to be a lot of identity, as well as things like not loyal. What's the word I'm looking for? Like loyalty. Solar things like not loyalty. What's
I kind
the
of get what you're saying.
I'm struggling thinking of the exact word I'm trying to use here. But with the sun in Leo, there's this comfortableness of being oneself. There's this understanding. I think at the end of the day, one of the things that separates the sun from everything else is that like the planets and the moon are just reflecting the sun's light, right?
Mm-hmm.
The sun is kind of the thing that's actually giving life, that's actually giving essence. The sun is kind of, I always kind of root it down to like the main source of the chart. Like without the light, like you wouldn't see the moon. Without the light, you wouldn't see the planets. And with the sun really comfortable, and it's in the ninth house, where the ninth house topics are going to be like solar activities where it comes down to being yourself. Like one thing I really like about the ninth house being about, for example, like foreign culture, foreign people, far distance travel, right? When you are traveling, when you're in a new place that you're not familiar with, where you can't, the social norms aren't like, your thing. Like if you were to travel to, I mean, like, let's say China, right? Like a completely different country, completely different social norms. Like it comes down to like, there's a lot of parts where you can really see who you are and who your like real self is when you travel. A lot of people talk about that as they travel and they go far places. It gets to help them know themselves a lot better. The ninth house being so much about higher education and spirituality and religion. There's a lot of solar identity, a lot of solar energy to that. Being able to understand who you are through a spiritual sense, through a religious sense, being able to understand and learn about yourself through that higher education sense. There's always this sense of pulling, I think, also with the ninth house, and the sun being, I mean, not only is it like the center of our universe, or the center of our solar system, I should say, not our universe. It has a lot of gravity that it kind of pulls in. And I like that the ninth house represents things like God. It's the house of God. It represents things like religion, like spirituality. And I think the sun finds itself really prominent there, because I also kind of like to look at the sun as God, because it kind of gives us life and the ability to see. And I mean, with astrology too, so much of it is on how the planets see each other and how light is actually given to one planet or another, and how the light actually works. Like it's so intertwined in its like functionality. And I think that kind of gets overlooked sometimes. And I think just with sun sign astrology, the real significant meaning behind the sun and like what it can represent in astrology, as well as, even where it finds its joy, I just think that can be kind of overlooked just from the whole sun sign horoscopes. And, once you get out of sun sign horoscopes, you get to the birth chart, you're like, fuck my sun sign. What's,
Mm-hmm.
this, what's that? But when you kind of draw it back, the sun being this, being kind of like where literally the center of everything, the beginning of everything, the light that shows off everything, it really comes down to that, that power that is unlike anything else, but what I would call like God level. And I just feel like the
Mm-hmm.
sun finding its being comfortable in the ninth house, is just kind of like, a sunflower being more comfortable when there's not a cloudy day, like when the sun is
Mm-hmm.
actually shining. Like I
Yeah.
feel like that speaks to a lot of the sun, finding its joy in the ninth.
Yeah. I love that. And especially when you were talking about like higher education and learning, and how the sun has that connection with your intellect, and how you're like genuinely like expressing yourself, your pure self-expression. And how, yeah, just the connection with like intellect, and then in the ninth house, like learning. I like to think of the sun in the ninth, the house of God. It's like right past the midheaven, but there's this
It's
idea of like still being up on top, like the high, like almost at the highest point in the sky, but it's right before it starts to fall into the eighth house, and then fall
well when
towards the western horizon.
when you go on a roller coaster, the roller coaster is the best example I can think of. Maybe like a plane would work too, but on a roller coaster, I'm thinking of I think it's called the Accelerator at Knott's Berry Farm in California. The Accelerator goes basically straight up, and then it has like this curve, and then it goes down. And there's this point in this curve where, you know, you go up, you go around the curve, and then once you're starting to very much like tilt down, your center of gravity comes back, and it goes from being pushed up, from going up the thing, to where it starts going down because you're about to go down the hill. And there's like that. It's like the same thing when you go under like have you ever been over like any dips, like driving, you know, and it says like dip, and you go through really fast, and your center of gravity, your heart kind of sinks. Like that moment where you're kind of like suspended in midair. Like that's how I kind of like to think of the ninth house. Like it's basically, again, like, yeah, things are kind of culminating up, and before it drops down super, super fast, you get this feeling of like, whoa, like it's about to happen.
Yeah. The imagery that comes to mind is like the Fool card too. It's like right before it falls down towards the eighth house, or towards, you know, whatever. I'm not going to even go into eighth house stuff right now, but
this is not an eighth house episode.
But yeah, so yeah, I mean, let's talk more about the general significations of the sun. You know, we talked about how it's about self-expression and even intellect, and just like radiating your own true brilliance. And I just did a lecture on called Solar Power, and the brilliance of your sun, and how it's basically just going through how like where the house that your sun is like where you need to feel seen and where you need to be noticed. And the sign is kind of colors the expression of like your intellect and what you're expressing outward. And so yeah, kind of looking at it like that, like there's this witnessing that comes with the sun, which I think when people think about Leos, especially, we're thinking about, you know, the stereotypical stuff of like, oh, they need attention, and they just want to be the center of attention and all of that. I see it as, well, why wouldn't the sun want to be seen? You know, like there is this natural
That's
witnessed.
Yeah, that's what is I always thought the, you know, oh, Leo just wants to be the center of attention, stuff like that. It's like, well, it doesn't really work like that. Like the sun is the center of our solar system. Like literally the planets are all literally revolving around the sun. So the sun, and this is where it kind of comes down, like, you know, when you put the sun in Leo, right, where it's the most comfortable. When people, it's so funny because so many people are like really afraid of attention. They're really afraid of being seen. And like the meme that's going around Twitter lately of like, you know, the rewards of being loved, but the fear of being seen, right? Like with like when you talk about like the sun in Leo, you're talking about someone who is comfortable being in those positions where you have, you know, 9 celestial bodies, or I don't want to say 9, well, maybe 9, I don't know, I can't think right now, not, like a bunch of celestial bodies surrounding you, right? When you talk about a Leo sun, there, it seems like they get a lot more attention, they get a lot more energy. And don't get me wrong, I think there's something to say when it comes to the sun. And you could, just like you can have not enough solar energy, you can have too much solar energy, right? But when it comes to the sun, they're more, especially sun and Leo, it's easier for them to get acknowledged or be seen. It's a more of a comfortable place for them, and not everyone wants to be seen. Like when you talk about a sun in Aquarius, they're not necessarily the first person that wants to be on center stage with the light shining on them, where every single flaw and every single thing is, you know, highlighted underneath the light. Like something that I like to really talk about with the sun too is humility, because there is no hiding with the sun, and how much the sun, and I think it's also too, like on Twitter, everyone talks about Leo being like the clown, like just like a super clown sign. And that's why, and I also really like using that for the humility aspect, because like you said, with being witnessed, right? Like the sun witnessing, like with the sun, you are put into the light. They're like, just like your highlights are acknowledged and they're validated, they're put in the light. So are your flaws. So are the, you know, problems that come up. So are the mistakes that you make. They're just as visible. I don't know if that answers your question. I feel like I kind of went on a different thing. But yeah. the one thing too that I hear a lot, like, because I'll get, like, I end up doing a lot of readings for people who, like, I'll be like their first astrology reading. So they ask me a lot of like, what's the difference between the ascendant and the sun? And sometimes that distinction can get a little bit hard to really, differentiate.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing I really like to say is like the ascendant is so much more of like how you're looking at the world, like your perception of stuff. Like the sun though is what you're putting off. Like, are you hot? Are you cold? Are you yes? Are you no? Are you in? You out? Like that's like the sun's putting off the vibe. The ascendant is all about you, how you're reacting to it. But if you're a sun in Leo, right, like you're putting off this vibe of like, there's a lot of valor, there's a lot of energy, right? Versus if you have a sun in, let's say, Cancer, you're putting off this vibe of like, hey, things are I'm a little bit more sensitive, I'm a little bit more caring, I'm also very defensive. Like it's just kind of literally the energy that you're kind of radiating. So when you talked about things like well, why I also like the sun being stuff about like your personality, like what you're kind of putting off, is a lot of people relate it to your vitality, which I think is a really important thing. You want, when you're not confident, when you're lacking that solar quality, you're more tired, you're more like stressed out, you're a little bit like, less energized, versus when you are confident, when you're feeling more solar, when you're able to feel more of yourself. Like the best way I can think of the sun is just being able to acknowledge and accept like who you are, like where the center of that really is, acknowledging like, that, you're kind of the one steering the planets kind of going everywhere. You're your own light. I feel like with the sun, there's this sense of wanting to just, how do I explain this? Hold on, I'm kind of blanking here for a second. The sun, I guess the general thing I really wanted to just go over is just the sun being about vitality, and just how it's so easy to like become tired, not have that personal vitality when you're lacking those solar qualities, when you're not feeling, like a Leo when you wake up in the day, right? Like when you're feeling like, I don't know, like Aquarius or something, and you're like, I don't belong, or you're feeling invalidated or not comfortable with like who you are, it's going to cause you to be more tired. It's going to cause things to go a little bit more haywire. You're not going to be able to see things exactly as clearly, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole like seeing things and illumination, the connection to sight, is definitely a huge thing when it comes to the sun. Yeah, I mean, I like to describe the sun as like your core, like literally like your core personality, the core of who you are, and how the sign it's in is like the filter. It's like the filter on the that you put on the camera, or on the photo or whatever.
It's the filter you pick.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and like that's kind of the expression that colors the expression of that solar inner core expression. Let's talk about like day charts and night charts, because there's definitely a difference in you know someone as someone born during the day, and I guess like the way that someone's sun is expressed if they're born during the day versus the night. For anyone who doesn't know, this is related to an ancient doctrine called sect, SECT. And basically what we're looking at is in any chart, especially birth chart, is the sun above or below the horizon? And that's going to determine if basically which team or which sect is running the show in your chart. So the sun obviously prefers the daytime because that's when it can be seen. And therefore, the houses that it can be in is the first house if it's above the ascendant, the 12th, 11th, 10th, 9th, 8th, 7th, 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 not 6th.
I was like, sun in the 6th house in the day chart? Where?
I just kind of kept going. But yeah, it has to be above the ascendant. And if not, if you were born at nighttime, the sun below the ascendant, like it is right now, if you're seeing this in the video, you can see that everything's dark in this room, because the sun just set. But yeah, your solar principle is I don't want to say muted, but basically the moon takes over as the prominent luminary, the prominent light in the chart. And so, yeah, I mean, check that out in your chart and see if you have a day chart or a night chart, because that will kind of add some nuance into how your sun is expressing itself. Like our friend Scarlett is also a Leo, but she was born at night and she has the sun below the horizon. And so I think that there's like a very noticeable difference between how she expresses her like Leo stuff and how you express your Leo stuff.
Yeah, day chart Leo versus night chart Leo.
Yeah.
Well, the main thing with sect is it's basically about teams. Are you team day chart or team night chart? And team day chart, right? Like when we talk about the luminaries, we're talking about what's being seen. Or in other words, what I like to say is like your brand. Like it's kind of like sun and moon is red team versus blue team, you know, or like lately I've been using a lot of like professional athletes for analogies for like sect and everything. But a day chart, like a day chart, yeah, you're in the day. It's the day's team. So like think of a Super Bowl that's being held at one team who's playing it. It's being held at their home stadium. Like you are there. That's your home game. Like most teams have a higher percentage of winning that whatever game that they're playing if it's a home field advantage. Versus your luminary out of sect. So if you're a day chart, your moon's on a different team, right? It's not at its home game. It doesn't have the home supporters that it's used to. Versus a night chart, this is what I kind of see really interesting, and just with the sun is at night, if anything was going to be shining, it would be the moon. And so I think a lot of night charts, their moons really depend on their relationship to the sun. So if it's a full moon, if it's waxing, if it's waning, and I think at the end of the day, the sun is still what you kind of want to anchor it to, because at the end of the day, still the moon is reflecting the sun's light. The planets are all reflecting the sun's light. The sun may not be visible, but the sun is also underneath the ground. The sun is also bringing light to what's underneath. And so something that I really like to put, it's like, if you're a day chart, your sun is above the horizon. It's out in the public. Everyone can see the sun during the daytime, but at nighttime, the sun's underneath. It's subterranean, right? It's only for you. When you look at this underneath the chart if you go from the ascendant to the descendant, first house, second house, third house, all that's all personal stuff that relates to the inside. And I see sun in the night chart is so much more like that solar energy is more of a personal thing. It's not an outwardly expression. It's more of an inwardly expression. It's more of like a flame, an internal flame, where the moon is the communicator to the public, almost in a sense, because the moon is going to be the luminary that if there was anything shining light that night that you were born, it would have been the moon. So the moon's going to be the one that's communicating that light out to kind of like anyone else. So I really see like the big difference between sun people, like sun in the day versus sun in the night, is like sun in the night is like that solar expression's like very loud. It's there. It's clear as day, right? But at night, that solar expression is more something you've got to get to know. It's underneath the surface. Like you kind of have to dig a little bit deeper, and you're really only going to see that moon first. That moon is going to be what's more prominent.
Yes, I love that. I love the day, like, yeah, day team, or like being at the at-home team advantage thing. That's great.
Mm-hmm. And you know, it's the sun versus the moon. It has to do with, again, like image. So when you think of, let's say, if I don't know how many people will watch football, but when you think of like the Patriots, for example, there's a certain emotion that gets invoked when you think of the Patriots, right? Like it's like, let's say, you know, like for example, Leo, since Leo's always talk trash on Twitter. But they're a really great, like, so Patriots. Let's acknowledge them as Leo, because also Tom Brady's a Leo. They're a great team, right? They've won a ton of Super Bowls, but they're also fucking hated. Like it causes a lot of uproar. But there's that identity with that team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus the moon, I think when you look at your moon sign, it's the same thing. If like the Patriots versus the Jaguars is a completely different game versus it's a completely different game than the Patriots versus the Broncos. Those are
Mm.
two completely different games, and they change the energy. And if you're a Patriots, if the Patriots are in Denver playing the Broncos, like, you know, it's going to be a really chaotic day. I'd say that's like the sun squaring the moon. But like, or like if it's the, you know, Patriots versus the like Browns or something, you know what I mean? That's like, they're going to sweep them or whatever. I like using that kind of idea of, it's that brand image though. It puts off that certain like, oh, you know, if it's this team versus this team, this tension's going to look this way. This relationship looks this specific way. But yeah, I mean, that's what sect kind of translates to, is like kind of like teams. Are you team day chart or team night chart? And, you know, if you're a night chart and you got to look at your sun is at the end of the day, your team, but you're playing an away game. You're not at your home, right?
Yeah. What do you think it means? I guess let's talk about like being a solar person or having a really strong solar influence in your chart versus not.
Uh,
Like when I think of that, when I think of a solar person, I think of someone that emanates a lot of light. I think the reason that people who love Leos because there's a warmth to Leos, and there's this element of like, yeah, they want to be seen, but like they make you feel seen too, and they can like shine their light on you and like warm you up in that way. And that is something I really love. And it's not just Leos. I think people who have angular sun, or maybe like,
Leo
yeah,
risings.
Leo risings, yeah. People that can, yeah, like they emanate that warmth and that, I would even say like it's an inclusiveness too, because the sun really just like wants to
All the planets are
shine.
included.
Yeah, yeah.
The sun doesn't leave out any planets. And
Exactly.
if a planet comes close enough to the sun, and it's stuck in its orbit.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and then to like not have a lot of solar energy, probably be someone who, you know, their sun is in a difficult house that doesn't aspect the ascendant, or maybe in a really difficult aspect to a malefic, especially some like a malefic like Saturn, where, or I would even say like an aspect, like a harsh aspect to Neptune, where that solar principle can kind of be muted in a way, or even like dispersed when we're talking about Neptune. And what does that look like for someone to like, yeah, have a lot of solar energy or not have a lot of solar energy?
Well, there's good solar energy and there's bad solar energy. I think at the end of the day, the sun has a lot, the main things that the sun has to do is like authenticity, vitality, your essence, stuff like that. When you, in this society too, because again, astrology has a lot to do with like the culture, the day of age it's in. One thing that you see a lot in the society is that like being like, you know, individual, like highlighting those personal qualities, being more authentic, it's not necessarily something that's super promoted right now in this society. So I think some people would think that being more, you know, of yourself, I think that's a big solar thing, of just literally being and accepting yourself. Like one thing I really like to relate to with the sun is, this is kind of a small, I'm doing something bad here. I'm using the 12-letter alphabet, kind of. We're gonna pull something really small from the 12-letter alphabet, and I really like to relate Leo to being like a kid. There's this authenticity to children that are like, they're not what society tells them. They are whoever the hell they say they are at that moment. And like what you said, it's like, you know, with being the sun, like it's very inclusive. It brings you into it. Like that's the same thing with like how kids kind of, you know, roll around. They're very like, you know, they're not looking to judge. They're just looking like, hey, this is who I am. This is who you are. They don't question anything about it. And with the sun, it has to do with being more authentic, being more of yourself. And I think a strong solar person is not going to be afraid of accepting who they are, and also not being afraid of putting that out there. Like the sun is not afraid to shine its light at all. You know what I mean? The sun is always going, it's always roaring. And in fact, something too that I'm kind of I like to pull a lot of the nerdy parts of like science into astrology. And like a lot of the sun's, what's interesting is just like the earth has our atmosphere that protects us from the solar radiation that would fucking kill us. The sun's solar radiation actually puts us in a bubble and protects us from the galactic crap that floats around the universe. And I just think the sun has this, like you said, inclusiveness to it. It brings people around it. A fire attracts bugs. A fire attracts warmth, and people want to be closer to warmth. And I just think that's part of being like having a strong solar placement, right? There's a lot of authenticity. You're not really afraid to be who you are. Like something that I really see a lot. This is one of my favorite examples is Capricorns. Because Capricorns they're their sun sign. They're like one of the most like insanely people there. Definitely their sun sign is Capricorns. While that is an opposite sign of the sun and where it operates, they take that really seriously, right? It's very natural to them. Sure, they're not this outgoing person, but their solar quality of being dependable, being, secure in who they are, having some type of structure, that's what gravitates other people towards them, right? Like that's what attracts people toward them. That's their fire that makes other people go like, hey, can I roast my marshmallows on that fire? Too much, being too solar, I don't think it's about being too solar. I think it's about you're gonna have, so the sun, for example, like I think the sun is eventually going to blow up, right? The sun also has sunspots, and the sun has its cycles where it's really intense energy and it's really low energy. It's an 11-year cycle. So what I think too much solar energy isn't necessarily too much solar energy. Well, maybe too much solar energy would be actually a good way to put it, because the analogy I was thinking of is like when you're out in the sun all day long, it's really easy to kind of get delusional and like to get heated, like wires kind of get burnt a little bit. That's the way I kind of think of too much solar energy when you're not thinking. A good way to one difficult solar position that I know of is always sun in the 12th house, because there's this inability to see or be able to recognize like your own self. Like something I always see with sun in the 12th house people is like they're always like they're always like oblivious to who they are. Like they can never really like put their finger on it, and like being really authentic, it's a lot more difficult with them. And I think having too much solar energy is being too oblivious, being too bright to see. Like you're so bright that you're shining out everyone else, and now you're just getting everyone mad because it's really hot in here. And I don't know if like something I've been struggling with, like cooking here, turning on my stove when it's been 85 degrees and it just gets so hot in the kitchen, you're just like, you get angry. And I just think that's part of having too much solar energy. But the thing is with the sun isn't trying to get everyone's attention. The sun isn't it's not necessarily trying to start life or trying to get these planets to revolve around it. It's just what happens naturally. And so the thing is with the sun that I kind of like to tell people, like, if you're being too solar, like you don't have to try to be solar. Like you don't have to go out of your way to do it. Like it's just something that you've got to walk into. Like same thing like when you ride a bike. Riding a bike is it's a mixture of like knowing that you need to push the pedals, but also having the balance, like knowing what it feels like to balance your body on two wheels. Being solar, I think just requires you, like, you don't have to try to be yourself, right? Like
some people, hey, not everyone's a Leo sun, Cam. You have to realize.
But that's a part of being yourself. Like it's the same thing like when you go to Aquarius suns, they crack me up because they're more Leo than Leos. Aquarius suns, like being themselves is that sense of like, they're like, oh, I'm this and I'm that, I'm quirky and I'm weird and I'm different and I'm all on my own, I'm original, I'm unique. Like that's just a part of who they are. Like that's just a part of it. You know what I mean? I feel like when you try to be yourself is when it gets difficult. It's like when you try to meditate, it gets difficult versus when you just meditate. Like when you just let it go versus like, oh, I'm trying to clear my mind. It's like, okay, like just clear your mind instead of trying to do it. But I also think, I feel like having a lack of solar qualities is that insecurity. Is that also insecurity, not wanting to be humiliated, not wanting to be seen, because there's this sense of wanting to isolate, wanting to, like think of the opposite of the sun. Think of Saturn. What does Saturn want to do? Saturn wants to cloak. Saturn wants to darken. Saturn wants to dim, right? And I just think there's a fine line between, and I don't even want to say a fine line. I think there's actually a very thick, bold line. It's very easy to see between not having enough solar energy and having too much. And I think it's easy to stay in the sweet spot. But when you're like a little bit lower in solar energy, when you feel insecure about yourself, when you're like, like for example, like the sun in Libra, where it's in its fall, where it's like, it struggles to feel that independent, like individual confidence. And the sun in Libra looks to bring, like the sun in Libra is kind of like, oh, like when you're falling, you reach for something to grab onto to kind of help support you, right? That sun in Libra going into its fall, it's looking for something to hold onto to bring closer to where it's like, well, someone, that's what I wanted to say, but we'll say something for right now.
Yeah.
The sun in Libra is looking for something or someone to help bring out more of that light, to help shine more of that light. You know what I mean? To magnify more of it, almost in a sense.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk more about the sun in different like aspects of dignity or without dignity. So we've kind of talked about the sun in Leo, but to kind of swing back to that, so the sun in Leo is in its own domicile, meaning it's at home. It has a sense of comfort and an ease expressing itself in the sign of Leo. What else do you want to say about the sun in Leo, Mr. Leo sun?
I want to say something about the sun in Leo, but before we say the sun in Leo, I want to talk about the sun in Cancer real quick.
Okay.
Chris Brennan posted this lecture from Alan White a while ago. It was like this thing that he did like before he passed away. And Alan White, this blew my mind. I was listening to it and he talks about the sun in Cancer being also in its domicile. And ever since I heard that, it's really messed me up. And there's so many things that like, I want to also acknowledge that the sun in Cancer, I personally think has that essential dignity to it, that it does have that like comfortability. Because when you think the sun in Cancer, the day, like when this summer solstice happens, day becomes the longest and night is the shortest. You also have when you have the Earth's rotation, when the sun comes up in the summer and it peaks at the Tropic of Cancer at 23.5. And so it literally reached its solar peak at the top at that Cancer tropic. And so I mean, we're also doing tropical astrology, so I think that kind of plays a little bit of a role in it. But I do like looking at the sun in Cancer as also being in its domicile, also being comfortable. I think with the sun in Leo, it's summertime, baby. Like it's hot, it's loud. Everyone's doing their own thing for summer because it's so hot. I think with the sun in Leo too, it's just about being comfortable with who you are. The sun shines the brightest in the summer. The sun is the warmest in the summer. In the summertime too, everything's kind of slowly getting baked. Like here in California, it's that really dry season, and it's like the sun in Leo season is like always the season, because fire season here is August, September, October. So it's like everything kind of dries up, it becomes really just hot, fiery, right? I just think the sun in Leo, you're comfortable, you're confident, you're yourself, and it's just easy to, the sun doesn't struggle to shine light in the summer. Versus in Aquarius, well, here this is a northern hemisphere talk right now. Versus in the northern hemisphere, when the sun's in Aquarius, it takes a lot longer for that brightness, for that sun, for that solar energy to actually come out in the day, because the sun doesn't rise till way later. It doesn't culminate as high. It stays really low. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I like to think of the sun in Leo too, when we're talking about it. It's a fixed sign. And so there's this fixity that comes with, or I guess you can say consistency that comes with the sun in Leo too, that it's constantly emitting light, no matter where it is, no matter what's happening to it. The only time, it's always emitting light.
It's always emitting light.
I was gonna say during like a solar eclipse, we don't get all that light, but that's that doesn't happen all the time. So yeah, you get your sun in Leo with the comfort and, like we're talking about, dignity, like the resources it needs to feel comfortable and to shine brightly and to express itself. And then we have the sun in Aries, which is the sign of its exaltation. And there is obviously a different expression with the sun in Aries. The sun being exalted in Aries to me is shows like a confidence. Like the sun is able to be solar in a way that is a little bit more direct and forthright with the rulership from Mars. And yeah, there's this unapologetically me sort of feel when it comes to Sun and Aries. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I'll make a distinction between the sun in Leo and the sun in Aries. So stars, I need to remember how our sun works. Yeah, I was just actually looking into this. I totally forgot. So how stars work is you either have fission or fusion. Fission is when an atom basically splits apart, and that splitting becomes an explosion and creates nuclear energy. Fusion is when two atoms basically hit together under immense pressure. Our sun works off fusion, so it's literally two things coming together, and that that connection under all that pressure creates an explosion, creates energy. The Leo sun, what I like about it is like when you look at the sun, it's literally just like this endless array of explosions, of literally like small nuclear bombs going off constantly all of the time. It's just there's this never-ending fuel almost for this to go on. But with the sun in Aries, I think it really reflects that togetherness, that fusion almost of like, hey, it's the sun's not necessarily a what's the word I'm looking for? I think a fission star would be different than a fusion. And I think with this, how Aries is about asserting, Aries is about coming off. I mean, when you talk about the sun in Aries too, you're talking about the spring equinox, when light is starting to shine more, days are getting hotter, or it's actually equal night, equal day, but it's leaning more towards the days getting longer, the days getting hotter. And I also like to look at the fact that the sun and Mars are the only two planets that are red in the sky. Venus, Jupiter, Saturn are all blue or star looking, like same thing with the moon. Like the sun and Mars are literally red. And I think that connection between the two, like it's, they share one another's qualities. I think the sun and Aries, the difference between like an Aries person or a Leo person is a Leo person's like, hey, it's sustainable, right? It's chill. It's everlasting. The sun in Aries is like right here, right now. Like it's a cardinal sign. It initiates that energy. It brings that energy to the table. The sun in Leo is trying to sustain that energy constantly. Versus that sun in Aries is like, I'm here. I'm right now. This is what we have to do. This is what we're jumping into. This is what this is who I am, and this is what I'm going to start. This is what I am starting. This is what I'm trying to do. This, like, sun in Aries is so much like just kind of comes off the bat like explosive. Like, because when you also think too, especially if you live in the north, like the equinox is such like a pivotal day. Like when you live in the north and there's snow and everything, like once spring comes, like that snow, really does stop coming, and it starts getting a lot warmer and a lot brighter. And like it could snow, like in Denver. That's what was funny about living in Denver, is like it'll snow one day, and by the end of the afternoon, all the snow will be melted. Like if you get to like Aries season or like even Taurus season. But just the sun in Aries being, I mean, also it's exalted sign. Something that I like to talk about with exaltations. It's like your cousin's house. So like you're comfortable there. It's basically your house, but you're not responsible for picking up shit. It's not your problem. But you get all of the benefits, all the perks of being at home, but none of the bad responsibilities of ownership. And the sun in Aries is like, all right, like I'm in Mars's house. That means I can be confrontational. I can be blunt. I can be myself. I can be unapologetically myself,
Right.
because I'm here. Like it's just bam, here I am.
Love that. Yeah. And like you were saying, the sustainability of the sun in Leo versus sun in Aries, like burnout is inevitable. Like the Aries energy is just constantly putting so much towards something and in like one large effort, and then needing to like take some time to recuperate, rest, gain that energy back up. So yeah, I love that.
Well, and just you reminded me too of the I think it's CERN. What CERN is doing? Do you know about CERN? The Hadron Collider. So
Oh yeah.
what's cool about that is the way that they're trying to create plasma energy is we don't have anything that would like hold plasma. Plasma is so hot we don't have anything that would contain it. But what they're trying to do is how plasma energy works is literally they're trying to get two hydrogen atoms, smash them together in that millisecond that they explode, taking all of that energy and using that. And basically how a hadron collider would work in theory to sustain energy would just be like, bam, atoms hit each other. Like just every couple minutes, two atoms hit each other. And that's so like Sun and Aries to me, of like literally just like, bam, all this energy, boom, big spark of energy, boom, big, here I am.
That is so Aries. So what about the sun in Libra, which is the sign of its fall? I know we talked about it a little bit, but yeah, there is this sense of like, the solar quality being dimmed, or I guess to kind of describe a planet in its fall, it's literally like in a sunken place. It's fallen. And so it has a harder time being seen or witnessed or heard for what it is, because it kind of has to almost at times push itself to extremes in order to get to that point of being witnessed or noticed. And yeah, the sun in Libra, the primary like light is more focused on other people or like intimate relationships, and less so much focused on the self. What do you think?
So I actually have a lot of feelings about Sun in Libra, but just like the Cancer Leo thing, you can't talk about the Sun in Libra without talking about the Sun in Scorpio. Because with the thing that I love talking about with the Sun in Scorpio is, so with tropical astrology, at the end of the day, we're talking about what the effects of the sky here on Earth. And when you talk about like something I like to talk about with Scorpio season, and it's the same thing with Leo season, when the sun's in Leo, it's hot, it's sunny, and it's staying that way for a while. When you get to Scorpio season, everything is dying. The plants are dying, animals are going away, they're also dying. Everything is literally like starting to come down. And with the sun in Libra, you get the transition. You get equal day, equal night, starting to lean more towards night. And so there's a lot that I really like about the Libra thing, because what's really cool about Libra season, especially if you live in a place in the Northern Hemisphere that has like all four seasons, in Libra season in October, you start getting fall and the leaves start changing colors. And what I think that really represents is this transition, the transition to death, and how a lot of like when things end, how beautiful things can be when they end, when all of the leaves turn brown and they age and then they fall off. And when you get to Scorpio season, all of that energy condenses in that plant, right? Like it takes off all of its leaves because it can't afford to use all of that energy anymore. And it retracts its energy, puts it in its roots, gets rid of all of the leaves and flowers so it could sustain that energy internally to get through the winter, right? But that Libra season, it's that difference. It's showing that like, I think there's a visual representation that like, hey, the light is going away. The leaves are changing. Things are getting colder. It is getting darker. It's like, with the sun in Libra too, it's the same idea of like scarcity. When let's say you're a squirrel and you need acorns for winter, during Libra season, you're going to be kind of like not excessive with all of your acorns. You're going to be a little bit more picky about how many you actually eat throughout the day, so you can make sure you have enough throughout the winter. And the sun in Libra, I mean, Libra is one of my favorite signs because again, for one, it's the sun's fall. It's Saturn's exaltation, but is ruled by Venus. It is this weird mixture of planets going on there, where it's like Venus makes it like really beautiful and charming, but the sun finding its fall there, where it's not warm. It tads more towards cold. It's Saturn's exalted sign, right? And I just think there's this idea of, like we said earlier, like when the sun is falling, it's you're reaching out to something else to hold on to. You want to mitigate that impact as much as you can. So you want to find something else to, rely on. To go back to the acorn analogy, you don't just eat all your acorns, then you're out. Like, you're going to run out of acorns, so you take them lightly. You don't eat as many of them. And the sun, the other thing too is with the sun in Libra, it's that transition from going from the days are really long to the nights are now really long. And I think that transition into, again, everything like dying, I think there's like a beauty to it. I think there's a magic to it. And also too, there's this sense of having to connect with other people. Like it's funny, like humans cannot survive without other people. Like we're such social creatures. And when you go into times of fall, when you are feeling inconfident, when you aren't feeling solar, you can reach out to someone else. You can get that from someone else. And I think that's what a lot of the Sun and Libra represents, is like building that bridge between people, illuminating that bridge between people, illuminating that connection that like, hey, you do, for example, like you need to work with other people, you need other people's help, but also other people can help you shine your own light type thing. You know, when it comes to fires, you don't have to start a new fire every time. Like, you know, if you, let's say you're camping and you have a campfire, you don't have to, and you want to go walk around and you want a torch, you don't have to start a whole new fire on that top of the torch. You can just stick the torch in the fire and take that flame with you. Like flame and fire journeys with you. There's no like stopping or ending it kind of thing.
Yeah, I do. I love that about Libra energy, how it's so much about relational, like relating to other people. And it's not just about the self, it's about like how that bridge, like you said, that connection between people. So yeah, I mean, we obviously, that's our connection is through our Libra planets as well. So I love that.
And it's, you know, you're so right. Like, it's not all about the sun. It's not all about you, right? Like, it's the sun. Sure, it gives a lot of life and everything, but also I think with Libra, when you start going into the night chart, there's also a lot of like discipline that requires. When the sun's going away, what do you learn? Like this, you know, like it's that Saturn quality, right? It's the discipline, it's the maturity, it's the responsibility, it's the obligation, it's the commitment. And that sun in Libra is now going like, hey, it isn't all about me. And this has to, you know, when there's times of scarcity, you have to share. You have to work with, you have to sacrifice. Yes, that's one of my favorite words. And when and it goes to saying too, because once you jump right over, you have the sun in Scorpio, where I think that's one of the craziest transitions is from Libra to Scorpio, because Libra is like this graceful fall to, you know, it's the same difference of the roller coaster analogy that we talked about. It's like when that roller coaster, it's like that teeter-tottering part, that's the Libra, and then you start going down in that Scorpio, and it's like that intense rush, that feeling of, I like to think of like Scorpio season, Black Friday. Like there's this scarcity in the air where people feel like they have to like be like, there's not enough of this, I have to take this from you.
Right.
Like and it's the opposite of sharing. It's the opposite of that Venus stuff. It's all Mars, and it's like, give me, and you know, I'll go down with it. And I just think the sun being in Libra is kind of highlighting more of that peacefulness. Something too, one of my favorite things about Libra season, and this is a very American North Equator thing, but how many weddings are in Libra season is ridiculous. Like when I was a wedding DJ, I mean, like every part, like our company was all over the nation. And so like, for example, in Texas, not everyone's getting married in the summer in Texas, but like everywhere around the whole country, like our peak season was always October. Like everyone gets married in October, and there's literally this illumination of harmony, of working together, of peace, of balance, of, you know, relationships.
Yeah, I used to call, or I guess I still do this, but I like to call Libra season cuffing season, because when you're in school and you're going back to school in the fall, which, you know, well, we don't have to get into that, just about how, you know, how that's happening in current times. But yeah, I mean, for us, when we were growing up, you go back to school in the fall and it's Virgo season, you know, you have to like get all your school supplies and stuff.
Get your school supplies, fucking nerd out.
But then when Libra season comes around, the dances start and the partying starts.
The partying starts. That's when you also have to have like your outfit good to go. Yep. And like, you have to be looking good in Libra season.
Exactly.
You know, it was really funny at the school I went to. We had a fight week. I went to a California public education school, and it was funny. During Libra season, everything was cool, but it was the week that the sun went into Scorpio. Literally, like it was always the last week of October that fight week started.
Damn.
Like, right when fight week started, you got all of your beef out then. Like everyone just fought each other, and the idea is if everyone gets in fights, no one gets in trouble.
Oh my God. I mean, for me, I went to a small all-girls school for 12 years. So the idea of like a fight week is just that never would even cross my mind. Like that just sounds like something out of a movie. Um,
No, not in Southern California. There was a lot of tension between everybody.
Damn. I mean, it's so hot, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. But it was, and that was one of my favorite things, is just to go back to that school analogy though. That's so funny. The dances are starting too.
Yeah, and everyone's like, "Oh, who am I gonna, pair up with for the winter?"
That's
Basically.
all the relationships. That's when they start too. That's
Yeah,
so funny.
yeah. So let's talk about the sun in Aquarius, which is the sun in its detriment. Um, and it's in his detriment because it's opposite Leo, which is his domicile. And yeah, the sun in Aquarius, I mean, the focus with the sun in Libra, at least, there's this focus on the other. Whereas with the sun in Aquarius, there's a focus on the group and kind of putting the group's needs first, or maybe even above your own. And how that's kind of where you get a detrimented sun, because you're getting someone that is more concerned with how to I don't want to say please the group, but how to, I guess, more concerned with the needs of the many, or I like to say like the 99% versus the 1%, and how to kind of facilitate a space, or facilitate kind of meeting everyone's needs, and what it takes to kind of like make things good for everyone and not just one person.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the sun in Aquarius has to deal with groups of people, right? Where you don't get like to kind of draw the difference between like the sun in Leo, Libra, and Aquarius is like the sun in Leo is like when TV is like, here's the main star of the show, look at them and they're great, and the sun in Libra is like also starring this random person, move on. Like it's like, hey, here's this. The sun in Aquarius is like how there's all of this big hype about the actors, but then like when you get to the end credits, like the key grip, it all like moves really fast. Like Aquarius is just like it's the background stuff that makes the show go on. And with the
Mm-hmm.
sun in Aquarius, there's this issue where you see a lot of sun in Aquarius people like do this like effort where they kind of focus on everyone else, but like if that's not the sun's job. Like the sun's job is to focus on you. Like it's okay to focus on you. It's okay to
Right.
say I'm different, I have special needs, and I have like it's about me. It's okay to do that stuff. But the sun in Aquarius, it makes it difficult because the sun in Aquarius, you feel like you have to be like another brick in the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Sun in Aquarius, it can make you feel like you're not getting acknowledged or validated or seen enough. Like it's the same thing like when you talk about like a Broadway show, the people that are working the lights, that are working the props and the sets and everything, like they're not getting acknowledged or validated. But without them, you wouldn't even have the show. They're more important than the actor. Anyone can act.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that Sun in Aquarius aspect has to do more with like, in what areas do you have to be okay not being seen? In what areas, like, when it comes to like that, like when you talk about like the Broadway show analogy, like, sure, you're not getting the whole audience to bow down to you at the end of the night, but like, you can be the one that says like, you're the reason why the show went on. You're the reason why the show happened at all. And I think the sun in Aquarius, the difference between the sun in Aquarius and the sun in Leo is the sun in Leo is the one who's put in the spotlight. And like I said, not everyone likes to be in the spotlight. And I think that has a lot to do with like, not saying that sun in Aquarius don't like to be in the spotlight. I think they do. But the sun in Aquarius is like, you don't have to be in the spotlight if you don't want to be.
Mm-hmm.
You're not forced to be seen. You're not forced to be this completely solar person. However, you're also like not exactly the most solar person off the get-go, and you have to actually try to be more solar and be like, hey, are you comfortable with yourself? Do you feel seen? Do you feel and acknowledge like who you are? Are you proud of who you are? Because a lot of sun in Aquarius, there can be a lot of like guilt and shame over their like identity and who they see
Mm-hmm.
themselves as and their energy. And there's a lot of, like the sun doesn't, it's hard for the sun to do its job when it's so cold outside. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And I think just the sun in Aquarius, it's the difference. It's dealing with blending in, not being individualistic. Another way I kind of like to look at like the difference between a Leo and Aquarius is kind of like the difference between like individualism and communism. Like
Mm-hmm.
they both have their ups and they both have their downs, but the difference between the two is like Aquarius, like the good side is you're working with everybody. The downside is you're working with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Good news with Leo, you're by yourself. The bad news, you're by yourself. Like you got to do everything on your own.
Yeah.
So it's just, you know, it's like yin and yang, you know what I mean? There's this and there's that. And I think the difference though with Aquarius, just more on the solar level, is it's not about being like, I feel this way and this is who I am. Like, it's more about like, what's more important though is that the show goes on. What's more important is that we're all working together. What's more important is that there's a system, that there's a Saturnian. And what's cool about too is Aquarius is, it's not like a set of rules like Capricorn. It's not a rule book. It's literally just like a consensus among society of this is how it's supposed to be. This is how you're supposed to be type thing.
Yeah. Yeah. There is this like, this very, I guess, understanding or consideration of one's place within the group or amongst peers. When it comes to Sun and Aquarius, like they really care about their place within a group, their role within society, and yeah, wanting to be one of many. I also think with Aquarius, going back to like talking about Saturn really in Aquarius, there's this very innate understanding of marginality and what it means to be on the margins of a system or of a group. And like, which I think that's why Aquariuses think that, you know, they're like so different than everyone else because they are different. And I think that's because they have this understanding of what it's like to not fit in with the norm. And I think that's where like the confusion between Uranus ruling Aquarius comes in, because it's like Saturn is that wall. Saturn is that boundary that you're orienting yourself within. And it's like, are you outside of the wall looking in, which is like an Aquarius, or are you part of the structure?
What side of the wall are you in? Are you with us or are you on your own?
Right.
Like, because that's the thing that Saturn and Aquarius can represent too. It's like not even Saturn and Aquarius, Sun and Aquarius people. They're either just like everyone else or they're complete lone wolves. Like, you know, it's the difference between like the Sun and Aquarius in that group mentality. You can't be individualistic. You have to kind of conform to the group. But there's also the exile part of the Sun and Aquarius of, well, if you won't fit into the group, we can just kick you out. And now you're on your own. You can be more solar, but because of the conditions, because of the situation, it doesn't feel more solar. Like and the other thing too, to kind of go to what you said, like the Sun and Aquarius people can, I feel like, be so much more of themselves because they know what it's like to kind of blend in. Versus something I see with a lot of Sun and Leos is like the opposite. Like they know what it's like to be themselves, blending in all the time. That's also they know how to be themselves, so that means they know how to like also blend in. They know how to like not be like super center of attention. I think that's good Leo, because sometimes you could also have bad Leo because too much Sun, right? Like, look at me, I'm the center of attention type thing. But also I feel like good solar energy is also like knowing where you shine, knowing when it's your turn, and knowing when it's not your turn.
Definitely. Yeah. I love that. I think we went through all four in a pretty good way. Let's talk a little bit about Cazimis and other like solar conjunctions. And by that I mean other planets conjunct the sun, or you know, within, I would say, like 3 to 5 degrees of the sun, and how that really colors your solar expression. Do you have any? Is your Mercury? No, that's not that close.
My Mercury's pretty far from my sun.
Okay, I have Mars and Pluto conjunct my sun within 5 degrees.
I have Pluto trine my sun by 2 minutes. So
yeah, that's right. You do have that, and you have the opposition to Uranus.
And sun opposite Uranus, and sun and sun trine Saturn.
Yes, you have a lot of that, like the big guys out there.
The intense ones.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I just wanted to note that, like, you know, I guess more than just like conjunctions or even aspects to the sun, there's so much that goes into your solar expression, more than just the sign. The house plays such a big role in it as well, because you can be, you know, a second house Leo sun, you're still Leo sun, and you still like to be seen,
but you're a Cancer rising
but
too.
you're a Cancer rising, exactly. Or like an eighth house Leo sun or Aries sun, or, you know, those things matter. And yeah, I just wanted to note that, like, with conjunctions to the sun, or I was talking to someone today who had a square from Saturn to their sun, and they have this fifth house sun that just like wants to be creative and expressive and do all the things and have fun, but there's a square from Saturn that's kind of like always letting them know, you know, the way I described it to them today was like, yeah, your son wants to just have fun, but Saturn's over there being like, yeah, but there's conditions to this. And, you know, how can you sit there and try to have fun when the world is ending? And, so, you know, nighttime Saturn putting all these restrictions and limitations on the solar principle. So yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything to add around like conjunctions or just aspects in general to the sun?
Well, one of the definitions of Kazemi. Oh,
Bless you.
thank you. Speaking of the sun, so the definition of Kazemi, it's basic. I think this is Ibn Ezra. I think this is what he says. I don't know, medieval astrologer.
Yeah.
They basically was like a planet next to the sun, and take this with a grain of salt. A planet next to the sun is like a dying planet, but a planet in the heart of the sun, like Kazemi, like conjunct, is a planet basically someone put on the lap of a king and basically on show for everyone. And so what I really like to do with the, like, if you got planets that are like, especially within 3 to 5 degrees of your sun, like, where is your sun getting in the way of seeing those planets? Because if you go out, like, if you were like, let's say you were born at high noon and you've got Mars and Venus conjoining your sun within 3 to 5 degrees, they're not Kazemi. So that means they're combust, they're on fire. And let's say you were born at 12 noon. If you would have went outside, if you would have went straight up to look at the sun, to look at your Venus and Mars, you wouldn't be able to see it. The sun was just shining all over that. Where is your sun shining over over those planets? I think that's one of the better ways to look at it. Like, is your sun shining over those parts of your life? Again, the sun rules things like ego. The sun rules things like, you know, just like your pride, the way that you see things, being like very individualistic. Like, where is that kind of getting in the way of seeing things? And I think that can color or texturize your solar experience, because it's kind of like, you know, if you've got like this headache all day long, but then you realize you're like, oh, I've got like a pimple growing on like the back of my head. Like, oh, that makes sense. Like, now I kind of understand why I had like a headache, or, you know what I'm trying to say here. I think though with the sun, because you know, it's so funny. I just had I've been getting a lot of clients lately that have a planet like Kazemi. And I think that's a completely different thing. I think your sun, and it's not even about your sun at that point. It's about whatever planet's conjoining the sun, because the king like literally is being like, fuck me, look at this thing. Like, look at this cool guy. And I think the sun is literally just about where's the light being placed. And when you think about, so like, when you think of like let's say like a 1940s 50s movie about detectives, and they bring the light in front of their face and they stick it in the other person's face, and you can't see that detective, right? The idea is to put the light in your face, to put the tension in your face, and you can't see who's even talking to you. I think that has a lot more to do with the sun, is like, are you doing that on purpose? Are you being like, you know, if you've got Mars and Venus, let's say in whatever sign, and your sun's conjoining it, like, are you putting off that solar energy more and kind of hiding the Mars and Venus behind that light? Or is your solar energy burning up Mars and Venus to where it's like your sun is overtaking what Mars and Venus could also do? Well, I also think too, it also kind of depends, because if it's like, I don't know, like a stellium, or like just like a group of placements, like if it's like a Mercury that's like conjoining your sun, it's like, well, that's just kind of part of there. Like, I always like to think of like the sun conjoining Mercury, like kind of like combust is like, it's like fleeting memories or fleeting thoughts, just kind of like, I don't know, like you think about something, you're like, well, maybe, I'm not really sure. Or then but having, I think, other planets conjoining the sun, besides Mercury, maybe Venus, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more of like, you know, what's kind of blocking that, or what's kind of shining with that. Another way to look at it is, if, let's say, for example, like my dad, he had a Capricorn sun and Capricorn, Jupiter, and Saturn and Mercury. And I always like to look at it as like that sun is the thing it's like the team representative, and it's representing Saturn, Jupiter, and Mercury in Capricorn. It's like their lawyer. It's like it's their face. So that's another way that I would almost look at it too, is the sun is representing what other planets that you have in that sign. Like the sun is the speaker for that. And so it's speaking on behalf of what other placements that you have in there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I love that, especially in relation to my Mars. And there, I just want to note too, there is this thing called a planet being in its chariot, which is basically the idea of if a planet is pretty close to the sun, combust, or even just underneath the beams of the sun, but it's in its own sign. It's kind of said to be in its chariot, meaning it's basically riding in a car, and it can kind of like, it has a little bit more protection from the sun, because it has that shade. Excuse me. So I'm lucky in that I have my sun in Scorpio conjunct Mars in Scorpio as well. And while I do feel the burnout from my Mars being so close to the sun, I do feel the fact that like it's in its chariot that kind of helps protect it in a lot of ways. So yeah, if you have that, like I see it a lot with like a Gemini sun with Mercury and Gemini, or yeah, even like I don't see it often with like the Venus. I don't see a lot of Venus Sun conjunctions. Like
I just
maybe
I
you
just
have
had
one.
I just had a client who had the Sun Venus Cazimi in Scorpio.
Oh yeah. That's like actually when I see it the most, and I think it's
I see them
because
a lot.
Venus retrogrades in Scorpio. So interesting.
Well, that's also why I think Venus is a different story, because just Venus is Synod is a whole nother universe versus just just Mercury and the sun.
Yeah. And also worth it to note that like when a planet is conjunct the sun, it's beginning and ending a cycle. And so
beginning or ending a cycle.
Yeah. So, but I mean, the beginning is an end, right? And vice versa.
Well, what's funny about it is, so like, let's say the sun is approaching Saturn, right? And then the sun conjoins Saturn, Cazimi, and then moves away. What's funny is that it's on fire on the way there. It's Cazimi, right? Purified, it's clean, it's all new, and then the sun goes past it and it's back to being on fire. It's like back to still changing. It's kind of like it's like a sneak peek of like what's to come. Like that's how I think of like, it's like when you're like your favorite artist, right? You know that they're in the studio, you know that they're making an album, and then they finally like post like a small leak of like of a song that they're posting, and that's all you get until the album comes out. Like that's what I feel like what Cazimi is almost. And it's like, well, like everything's still under wraps, so you don't know anything, but here's like a little sneak picture of what the rest of this transit's gonna look like, or what this album's gonna look like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're so good with those metaphors. So let's talk a little bit about how folks can work with the sun, especially if it is in a difficult sign or house or having difficult aspects. Like how can one, work on strengthening their solar principle?
So this is what I'm gonna say. I'm gonna say what Twitter says men are all the time. It's like what does it say? Men always have the audacity no matter what. Have the audacity. Have the audacity.
Yes.
That's the way to really overcome a difficult sun. Like let's say you're a sun in Capricorn in the 6th house, and you're like, man, I don't feel confident, or I don't feel like myself. Go to your boss, go to your coworkers and be like, you're listening to me now. And this is the way that we're going to do stuff. And you'll probably have things go your way really well if you've got your sun in Capricorn there. Like, or if you've got like a sun, another way to look at it is it kind of depends on a lot of different things. Like, if you've got your sun in it's different versus like your sun being in a difficult sign versus you not feeling solar, right? I think if you got your sun in a difficult sign, I think that's going to help you. Like what I really believe is when you've got a planet in detriment and fall or whatever, it's going to help you learn that planet better. If you get,
Yeah.
it's the same, like, if you've had an easy life and shit's just been a walk in the park, it's not like it's going to be, understanding shit is going to be a little bit harder for you versus if you've had life rough, you've been through ups and downs, like you can appreciate the good stuff. What things look like good, what things look like bad. You have experience, you have character. With the sun being in a difficult spot, you're going to get better. You're going to eventually figure it out, but you got to figure out where it is, like where you feel that. And the thing is, in my opinion, wherever your sun is at, you need to be that person in that area. So like bring that Leo energy to that area. Cause you could also look at like this, like Leo rules the sun. So let's say you're a Capricorn sun in the 6th house. That means you're a Leo rising. So that means like you're going to be like you are someone who's very much involved in their work, and that sun in Capricorn can be kind of difficult because it's also in a dark house. The 6th house is where the light starts to dissipate, so that could feel kind of uncomfortable. Or like the sun being in, let's say, the 12th house. Let's say you have a sun in the 12th house. Let's say it's in Pisces. Okay, if you have a sun in the 12th house in Pisces, I don't feel like that's hard. I feel like a sun in Pisces 12th house is going to be like super Pisces. They're just going to be like, yeah,
I feel like that's why it's hard. It's like way too sensitive, way too open.
Well, I mean, it's like you're a sun in Pisces. You're going to be sensitive. You're going to be specific to that stuff, but not being sensitive or not being into that type of stuff also means you're not being true to your own nature. And I think being out of your own nature is worse than being like awkward in your own domicile, right? Like the sun in the 12th house, it's hard to uncover everything about yourself, but the thing is, just be sun in Pisces in the 12th house. Go on random trips, hang out with these people randomly, do this randomly, just explore. I feel like I cannot remember what this museum was called, but when I was a kid, it was a science museum in Palm Springs that we got a field trip to one time, and I forgot why this place was the way it was, but what was so cool about this museum was like you were allowed to just go in and touch everything. Like,
was it like a please touch museum?
Not necessarily. It was a science museum specifically, but like it was super kid friendly. You could do whatever the fuck you wanted there. Like with the sun in Pisces in the 12th house, like do that. Like the sun in Pisces in the 12th house, there's a lot of finagling. Like you have to figure it out. Like you have to. The 12th house leads with discovery, right? It's about hidden enemies, things that you don't see, things that are hidden. So it takes going through some stuff in order to find it, right? I just think dealing with or lacking that solar energy, maybe having a difficult sun or a difficult aspect, like especially if you have like Saturn square or opposite your sun. Yeah. I just think a big thing is, for one, relax. The sun, my favorite thing to think about the sun is the smiley face sun. How the sunglasses, like how everyone draws the sun with sunglasses on, chilling, like chill, be like that sun. How can you just vibe? How can you just be? And it's not about it's just about being yourself. Like if being yourself means like, I see a lot of Scorpios, not talking about you here because you're one of the rare, very nice Scorpios. But when I see a lot of Scorpio suns that have like a lot of like anger, or they're like they'll rage out, and I'm like you should do that. Like why would you not do that? Like that's part of like who you are. That's how you've always done it. That's authentic to who you are. Like if you are a Scorpio and you're like, I'm angry about this, or I'm also Sun in Scorpio, I'm really sad about this, I'm really depressed, like that's part of being a Scorpio. Like that's being true to your nature. Like I think trying to push yourself away from that, like that's bad. Like, oh, that's not normal. Like, I think that's where you run into problems. Like if you want to be more solar, like accept that, like take that on. Yeah, it sucks. But what you want to do with it is like feel it. You know what I mean? It's rather than pushing the feelings down below, like express it, feel it. That's what the sun's about. The sun does not shine its light, no matter if it's Scorpio or if it's an Aquarius or if it's in Leo. It is shining its light, period. Yeah. And so rather than denying that, like let it shine, like I know that sounds really corny, but like at the end of the day,
No, I
Let it
mean,
shine.
one of the things that I like to recommend to people who have a hard time feeling seen, or being in the public or witnessed, especially people who are starting their own businesses or, trying to become a personality, like, social media and all that, and the fear that comes with that like witnessing, something very simple is to just like get out in the sun and feel what it feels like to be witnessed by nature,
Mm.
um, and go on a walk and talk to the trees, and like have that's just like some kind of like somatic things that you can do to kind of like,
Get that vitamin D.
yeah, get
Like,
that vitamin D, allow yourself to be seen in a way that is more comfortable and less, yeah, less scary, I guess. And just developing a relationship with the sun, and like, you can talk to the planets. It's
yeah, you could
it's
talk
really
to
fun.
plant.
You can talk to
Yeah.
them and just ask the sun for more help with that. Yeah, and make sure that when you're in the sun, you're, maybe show off a bit. And
I I completely agree on that walking. That's actually a really good idea of like be witnessed to the sun. Let the sun see
mhm,
you. And
yeah.
because one thing I was going to say was like also too like something that like me and my sister always do is like, well, like if we're going out shopping or something, like we're just like we were when we were kids. Like we'll yell stupid shit out loud. We'll be like, what? Like it's just like don't be unapologetically like yourself. Like it's so easy. Like if you're like, let's say if you're shopping at a store like a Target or something like that, and it's like you're with someone and your friend, and they're all being loud and rambunctious or whatever, and you're like, oh, stop! Like I don't want the attention on me. Like who cares? Like
That's
be loud.
me. I'm like, please stop.
Please stop, don't embarrass me. Oh my god, it's like who cares? You don't know any of these people. They don't know you.
To be a
Fuck
Leo
them. Like
sun.
just well, that's why I think that's good remediation. Like going and acting silly somewhere. Like
hmm
going and being seen. That's why I also really like putting the sun as like the ruler of humility. Like, and because the thing too is with the sun, we all make up stories and we all want things to look exactly the way that we want it to. And we know that that's really hard, like putting up those high expectations, it's almost impossible to hit. But with how was I going to say this? Like you don't want to be how do I want to say this? Because I got to word it here. I got to word it exactly right here. Like to go back to like the Target thing. Let's say, you're being loud, you're doing your thing, people are looking at you. Like you don't want to feel humiliated or guilty that or actually let me take that back. What I really wanted to say is failure always looks a lot scarier in your mind than it does in reality. And that fear of humiliation, like it's the same thing like when you're a kid and you do like a book report and you got to present it in front of the class. Like in your head you're like, this is it, I'm done. Like there's no going back after this. But then you do it and you realize no one cares, because this is some of the best advice I ever got as a Leo sun was stop worrying about yourself, because everyone else is way more worried about them than they are about you. And that's the key to unlocking solar energy. Realize that everyone is selfish as shit. We're all we only care about ourselves. That's how we're programmed to be. So don't be afraid of what other people see you as. Don't be afraid of how other people see you, because they're so much more concerned about how they look than how you are. And the other thing too is like, if you are more of yourself, if you are more unapologetically yourself, if you're not afraid to act silly or be, humiliated or whatever, like you're only going to allow other people to be like that. Like when you start being more comfortable with yourself, you allow other people to be comfortable with themselves too. And that's why that Leo energy attracts so many people, because it's like, wow, this person doesn't care. Like they can be whoever they want. That means I can do that too. And I think and at the end of the day, if you really want to help people, if you really want like to be a change in the world, like you have to be the change that you want to see. It's not you should be the change, but you are literally not helping or changing anything unless you are walking the path that you are preaching. Like if you want, to be more inclusive and give people the space, like you have to put off that energy. You have to not be afraid to be who you are. And it's just, and in this in this society, I think a lot of it has to do is just right now in this moment with social media. Like we're so afraid of everything being seen, right? We're so afraid of putting everything out there or being seen in the wrong way. And it's just like, man, just be yourself. Like, just be yourself, go out there and do it. And when you do that, you allow everyone else to be themselves. You allow everyone else that same room. And that's what people need, is that comfortability of doing that, rather than being what society tells them to be, or being what others are projecting you to be.
Love it. Snaps to that from our ninth house Leo sun, pumping us the F up. Thank you so much, Cam. I had so much fun getting solar with you.
Getting solar, yeah, at night. Getting solar at
Getting
night.
solar after dark. Why don't you tell us where we can find more of you?
So I'm really known for doing a weekly horoscope on YouTube. I do other YouTube videos, but I do a weekly horoscope on YouTube. You can find me just at my name at Cam White or Cam White Astro. You can find me at Twitter at Cam White Astro. I talk about astrology and complain that I'm on Twitter. And, that's it. I don't have any other. You have my website where you can book a reading with me at camwhiteastro.com. And from there you can find any other social links that I might have.
Sweet. And we will link everything in the show notes as well. Thank you, Cam.
Thank you for having me on here. This was so much fun talking about the sun with you.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have you on again. And I'm sure I'll talk to you soon, because definitely, yeah, we'll definitely have to figure out a way to meet up somewhere sometime soon.
No, definitely we'll have to. But yeah, well, thank you for having me on here.
Awesome.